Hey guys, I'm Krista from Hilltop in the Valley. Today I wanted to kind of go over bagel making with you. I make sourdough bagels and I use einkorn flour to make them, but there's a certain step in bagel making that people will do, and that is to put bagels into boiling water before they actually bake the bagels. And my question was always, does this actually help at all? Is this a really needed step in the process? And so today we're going to be doing some experimenting and seeing how it works to use that process versus not use that process while making bagels. I also want you to know that bagel making is not a hard thing to do. It's a really simple task actually. As far as bread making goes. People think that maybe making a simple sourdough loaf is like the easiest task, but really making bagels is not much different except that you're rolling the dough into a circle. That's about it. So I wanted to bring you along and show you how I do this. I actually have another video on making bagels that I made a few years back. This one I used whole grains in. It was a combination of both whole grains and all-purpose flour. I still have that recipe up if you want to go get that recipe. But today I'm going to be using an all-purpose einkorn flour. And we're going to start doing this in the morning. This is often a recipe that I use overnight. So I'll mix the dough up the night before, and then it's ready for me in the morning to make the bagels. In this instance, it's easier for me to just start it in the morning, and then I had an afternoon free that I could do this with you guys. But you can do either way. It'll work either way, okay? Also take into consideration when you're rising the dough, how much time you're gonna need and how warm it is in your house. So if you are making bagels on a hot day, it's not going to take as long to rise the bagels. You're not going to want to necessarily leave the dough out overnight in a hot house if it's getting like into summertime, okay? You might want to do that if it's wintertime and it's only 65 in your house. That would work great. But in summertime, if it's like 76 degrees and you're putting that dough out for all night and you're not going to be back for 10 hours, that's going to be a little bit too long for it. The good thing though is that bagels are a little bit more forgiving, okay, than a lot of these sourdough artisan loaves that you're used to seeing. And so even if you mess up a little bit, I feel like you're going to be pretty impressed by your own bagel making skills because it's actually a pretty forgiving dough. So this sourdough starter that I'm using is an active sourdough starter. I keep my sourdough starter pretty thick. I do this because einkorn tends to like it being that way. It likes a thicker sourdough starter. If you have more of a half and half, half water, half flour sourdough starter with einkorn flour, it does not appreciate that very much. Those little organisms want to have more to eat. And so I do recommend, if you're doing an einkorn sourdough starter, to have a thicker starter. I'm going to do a 1/4 cup of sourdough starter in this, my thick sourdough starter, and then I will kind of thin it out with a 1/4 cup of water, and then I will put the other full cup of water in with it. After this, you can add your flour, you can add a little bit of honey to sweeten it if you wish, and you can put your salt in, and then you'll mix that up into a dough. I like to bring this together, fold it a little bit, and then I'm going to set it aside. Okay, so you're going to set this aside for about 15 minutes or so and just let all of the liquids be absorbed into the flours, let it all come together. As this is an ancient grain, it will actually take a little bit longer for all those to be absorbed than it would with a modern day wheat. And then when you're done with that, you'll come back and you can go ahead and take that little ball of dough out and do some more folding with it. Some people do not appreciate having the air bubbles in bagels. I, on the other hand, do enjoy having little air bubbles in bagels. And because einkorn is not as much of a riser as a lot of flours, if you work with einkorn, you know this, I really do like to do my folds to try and bring extra air into my doughs. You can see this on my biscuit making video, how I do the folding. You'll see this on my simple sourdough bread with einkorn flour video. I try and do this a lot just to bring in that extra air. So once you're done with folding it several times, put it back in the bowl. You're going to cover this up and set it aside for either maybe like 3 to 5 hours if it's really warm, about 8 hours if it's just a normal 70-ish degrees. And if it's extra cold, you can leave it overnight and it can maybe sit for about, 8 to 12 to 15 hours depending on the temperature. So first we're going to start with our bagels that we are not going to put into the boiling water. I will admit I do this sometimes. I'm going to say this right off. I am not one to always boil my bagels. And I want to actually do this experiment today to see what the difference really is. Because I know there is some of a difference and I want to share it with you. So we're going to go ahead and take the dough out. We're going to split it up into 8 parts. And then we're going to roll out our bagels. I'm using the bench scraper that I got from Cooey Housewares. I talk about them quite a bit. I really do enjoy their products. I like that they are a family-owned company. They're based in Michigan, and they do really try to get solid products that work wonderfully in the kitchen. I have my own bench scraper, dough scraper that my husband made for me. This one is a little bit different than that. This one is made out of metal instead of wood. It also has the measurements on it. It has a scooper so that I can pick things up, and so it's great for crushing garlic. It's got a little garlic press in it, picking up vegetables, and it does have a little bit more of a blade on it, so I like that as well. If you do not have a bench scraper, this was a great one to look at. I'll put a link to Cooey Housewares in the information box below, and they do offer 10% off with the coupon code Hilltop in the Valley, or by using my link below, they will give you that 10% off on your first order. To roll out our bagels, we pretty much just roll the dough into a little snake. This one is going to be not very long. That is, I think, a beginner's problem is to roll them too long. I don't like to roll them long. I like to roll them on the shorter side and then stretch them if I need to stretch them more to get that circle. But you'll notice if you roll them really long, you're going to have a big opening in that bagel, and that's not how bagels really are. They're actually almost completely closed when you get them from the bakery or the store, right? And so we're going to start with a shorter worm, if you will, a shorter snake of dough, and then stretch it as needed as you're turning it around. Connect them by simply pressing the ends of the dough into the other side, wrapping it around the other end if you need, and then you're going to put them on a floured, parchment covered baking sheet to rest. These we will cover for about 45 minutes, an hour. After about a half an hour, I'd like to get my pot of water going, but remember, this time we're not going to do this. In fact, I might not even have enough time to let them rest this long, and I'm going to try and just put them in the oven. So like I was saying, I do this sometimes when I cannot do the boiling, and usually that is because we don't have time. I want to make bagels, but I don't have time to do the whole boiling process, and that happens, and that might happen to you. So that is why I feel like this experiment is a really good one to do for you guys. So we'll put these aside, then we're going to come back, and this is when our oven is going to be heated to 450 degrees Fahrenheit. I have to make a confession though, guys. I actually heated my oven wrong this time on purpose. I put it at 500 because I happened to be looking in another person's book and saw that they cooked their bagels at 500 degrees Fahrenheit. And that was a big mistake because, as you'll see, I kind of burned the top of the bagels a little bit, and I've never done that before. I figured I would try it and see how it turned out, and it did not turn out good. So I'm going to stick with the 450 degrees Fahrenheit next time, and I am not going to go for that 500 degrees again. That was way too hot. I am going to go ahead and switch over to my other dough so you can see us put that together and see the difference between the boiled bagels and the bagels that were not boiled in water before being baked. So as you can see, the bagels that were not boiled before I baked them, they are fine to eat. And honestly, my kids don't really notice much of a difference. What I notice in them is the outside is not as perfected. I notice where the outside of the bread has come apart. You'll see cracks. The outside isn't sealed as much when I put it into the oven. And I do think that pre-boiling them or pre-cooking them, if you will, does help them start that cooking process, but then get the outside to seal before you put it in the oven. So what do I see this boiling process helping with? I see it helping with sealing and pre-cooking the outside so that the outside will not come apart, it will not crack, and it will have a much more finished look. And this will help if you're trying to, say, make a bagel sandwich, because it prevents it from falling apart as easy. If you have a crack starting and then you try to cut a bagel apart, it's a lot easier for that crack to continue on into the bagel and take apart the bagel, say, where you're trying to cut it, but in a different direction, right? So my final thought is it's okay to go and just bake your bagels without doing the boiling process if you don't have time for it. I will probably continue to do that every once in a while. But if I have time for the boiling process, or let's say if I am planning on bringing these bagels to some event or I want to share it with others, I will probably try and make them at a time when I have enough time to do that boiling process, because they turn out a little bit more perfected, a little bit better finished. So what do you think? Do you make bagels at home? Have you seen a difference if you've tried to do it without the boiling process? I think there's good reason to do this boiling process. I like the fact that it does kind of pre-bake it, especially with putting that baking soda into the water. But once again, if you're not going to be able to do it, there's nothing wrong with foregoing that and still having a great bagel in the morning. So anyways, I hope this video was beneficial for you guys. Let me know if you got something out of it, if you have any questions. And you can see the recipes online, hilltopinthevalley.com. Look in the information box below for specific recipes or for specific bagel recipes. If you are not subscribed to this channel, would you please do that? It helps you to be able to see more in your own feed as well, if this is a type of video that you enjoy watching. Thank you guys for coming along today. I hope that you are having a great springtime, and I will be back with some more great ideas for you in your home and kitchen. Talk to you again soon. Bye-bye.